What's up, y'all, and welcome back to Dad Needs to Talk. I am your host, Robert, aka Father of Vash, and today I'm going to be talking about Vinland Saga Book 8. So let's get to it. What's up, y'all? We are back for some more Vinland Saga. So, I know this has been a very long time coming, but before we get to talking about some Vinland Saga, as always, if you are new here, then welcome. If you are a returning listener or watcher, then welcome back. If you are not already, make sure you are subscribed both to the podcast feed as well as to the YouTube channel. And make sure to leave me a like, comment, let me know what you thought, and all that fun stuff. So, let's go ahead and dive into some Vinland Saga. So, just as a little recap, for those of you that might be watching this for the first time. So, my history of Vinland Saga, I'm gonna make this super brief, but I knew little to nothing about the series before the anime debuted. Man, what was that, 2 years ago now, because that was 2019. And then earlier this year, I decided after I started doing the Dad Needs to Talk podcast, I was like, you know what? I want to pick up and check out, this series. And so before, starting off or whatever, I previously ended up doing, or one of the first mangas that I purchased after starting the podcast or whatever, I purchased the first volume of 20th Century Boys Perfect Edition, and then it was Vinland Saga Book 5, because that's pretty much where the picks up after where the anime season 1 of the anime ended. But I ended up getting Book 5, then Book 6, then Book 7, and I read through them all. I did podcast episodes dedicated to all 3 of them. So if you were interested in hearing my thoughts, as well as a very lengthy read through of them, I think they're all knocking on like an hour a piece, 40 minutes to an hour a piece. So yeah, go check those out. I'll have those linked below. And also, right before I did this video, I have recorded kind of just like a very brief reflection on my thoughts all these months later of these 3 books and of that arc in general, before we get ready to head into, the new one. So yeah, so go and check out all that stuff. And yeah, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So this book pretty much picks up, and obviously, let me say this up front. We obviously gonna go into spoilers. That's how I do with these. I guess if I had to give like a general spoiler-free thing, hey, I'm excited to be back reading Vinland Saga. I wish I didn't wait so long, but hey, life happens, other things happen, but we back at it. But just saying, hey, it's good to be back in this world, back with these characters, and off onto a whole new adventure. And so, with that adventure, we are kind of have our eyes set to the east, to Greece. It's what we end up finding out. That's where where our journey is going to take us. We find that, of course, like midway through this book. But yeah, and we get to meet some awesome characters. Thorfinn has to encounter a very hard truth by the end of the book that I definitely gonna get to. but yeah, but I guess I just want to start off by saying like this cover is so beautiful with if I forgive me if I'm not pronouncing her name right, but Gudrid, and then this I think this bird is called a tern, and so yeah, just very beautiful cover, and yeah, so let's kind of just like dive in. Now I'm gonna try not to go, chapter by chapter, page by page, and all that stuff. We'll try to keep this somewhat brief, but important for any, for the page turning you're going to hear, but you're going to hear some page turning, as is the case of this. But just to kind of set up, this covers chapters 101 to 115. So, yeah, nice meaty book. But pretty much starting off, we pretty much pick back up with where the last arc / last book ended, with Thorfinn, still kind of catching up with his family, and they're as well as kind of get introduced to some of the new players in this, but we end up having a moment to where, or I guess before I get to the serious thing, I want to start off. We start off with a very funny moment where Thorfinn's sister is giving him a haircut, and he gets this freaking whack, cheesy looking bowl cut. But it's just very funny, just seeing these two interact, and how how his sister is telling him that, like, hey, you're of age, you should be you know getting married, settling down, having kids. And then Thorfinn's, he's like, but I have to go. And he ends up that night talking to his family and everybody, and basically explaining, it's like that night Thorfinn told his family about the events he had experienced over the last 16 years. And so we get just like various flashes from everything from Thor's death to, his fights with Askeladd, to, him having to deal with Canute, going into slavery, fighting Thorkel, and all the other crazy stuff that's happened in between. But yeah, it's from Thor's death to his departure from Catil's farm. He was brief in detail, speaking only of the most important features, but the hatred, the strife, the death and the destruction, the despair, the regret, the sadness, and the rebirth within his story left all who heard it speechless. And yeah, that was just like a very powerful way to kind of kick things off, just from people very close to him, as well as even Einar, because Einar, he started learning a little bit about Thorfinn when when they were on the farm for those three, in slavery for those 3 years, but he didn't know all this detail or whatever. So yeah, from there we kind of pick up with our introduction to Gudrid. And it's kind of funny because we start off with a flashback of her as a child when she tried to stow away onto Leif's ship. But they told her, like, hey, no, you're a girl, girls can't be sailors, all that stuff. But even all these many years later, to where she's a young adult, we find her still trying to sneak onto Leif's ship, and because she is to be wed to Half Don's son, who is like kind of like the king or the ruler of this area. And so so she's trying to hide and stuff, but of course they catch her because she cannot be sneaky to save her life. They begin arguing again, and she ends up cutting her hair to try to prove a point of like, hey, I am dedicated to doing this. And so then we have a moment to where she ends up slipping on the dock, hitting her head, and as everybody's trying to help her up or whatever, her husband to be, Sigurd, walks up and he's like, "Yo, what are y'all doing to Gudrid?" And he just goes on the attack from jump. He just pulls out the freaking like chain whip thing and just starts just like, y'all are filthy kidnappers. He's tearing up the dock with this freaking crazy chain thing, and freaking what was it? Thorfinn catches it. That's right. Cause like Thorfinn wraps his arm up in like some cloth, and he ends up catching it. And yeah, so that's kind of how we get our introduction to Gudrid and all of her many shenanigans that we will come to see. But this is where Sigurd and Thorfinn like reintroduce themselves, and so yeah, so this is kind of like their reintroduction, and then kind of next up we kind of have a moment to where Thorfinn ends up approaching Halfdan, with his proposition of basically like, they're needing funding and stuff in order to make this trip to Vinland. And so he tells them like, hey, I wish to develop the land of Vinland far to the west, and I'm looking for someone to lend their wealth to our cause. And so yeah, this is where they kind of begin discussions. And so right before they get ready to go in for the conversations or whatever, we kind of get a look into how Halfdan kind of operates and stuff, to where he offers people a loan and stuff, whatever, for that come to him in need, and then when they can't pay, then they basically become slaves for him to work off that debt, so to speak. But he ends up asking Leif basically like more information about Vinland, because it's like, where is it, what is there for us there, whatever. And so so Leif is just telling him about like how he didn't go on it, but he saw it from a distance at one point some years back when he was traveling and everything, and how a previous group that tried to step foot on Vinland apparently got attacked and killed in the process. And of course, this is something that Leif didn't tell Thorfinn about. And so this part I really enjoyed, because it's where Halfdan tells everybody else to get out the room, so it can't just be him and Thorfinn talking. And so there's a moment where we see this bird in the cage in the room, and Thorfinn's like, "What is that?" And he's like, "It's a bird called a tern." And so they're like, "Okay, it's very weird to see that type of bird in this season." And then Halfdan says, "I found it recently. It was a stray from the flock," and basically talking about how how the bird was too weak and that's why it stuck, whatever. And so yeah, so basically his son brought it to him. And he tells Thorfinn, he's like, "Hey, if you want to eat it, it's yours. I don't have any use for it." And Thorfinn's like, "Can I release it and set it free?" And then Halfdan's like, "It will not last long if you do, because it's weak and couldn't cross the sea." release it, and it will suffer a miserable death of freezing and starvation. And then Thorfinn's like, let's let it choose. Let's let it make its own choice how it will live. And the bird wasted no time, had proper strength, and just flew off. And Halfdan's like, I can see you're Thor's son indeed. And he, Thorfinn's like, oh, were you friends with my father? And Halfdan's like, no. We didn't see eye to eye, and I don't think you and me will see eye to eye either. And so basically, the conversations just continue for a bit. And then Halfdan's like, basically like, what do you have to offer me as collateral? And so basically Thorfinn's like, I have nothing. And then Halfdan's like, well, your pride, kiss my boot and I'll consider it. And Thorfinn's like, because we know Thorfinn has been through some crazy ish, so just kissing somebody's boot, Thorfinn's like, yo, right, that's all I gotta do to get some money? Hey, which shoe? Both of them? And Halfdan is disgusted as Thorfinn was literally down on his hands and knees about to kiss his boots. And, so the deal kind of fell through at the moment. But yeah, they're going back to the drawing board on that one for a minute. And then this part is kind of what starts to lead us to our expedition to Greece, because Leif comes in and says that Halfdan gave them 24 narwhal horns. And basically it seems like he's testing them of like, hey, you go and sell this and make some money, then hey, I will fund, your little project. And so while that's going on, we start to learn more about Gudrid and her backstory and stuff. And we see the moment of basically like the moment that basically like inspired her to want to leave the village and to go and see the world, because Leif had just came back from one of his expeditions, and he was he brought all types of trinkets and stuff, but the conversation started basically with her asking like, okay, Leif, like where are you, like where do you come from? And he showed like, oh, I'm from this island that's like a day away, a day by boat. And then she's like, okay, the honey you brought, where did that come from? And this just kind of continues as it's like, okay, the honey came from way over here, and this other thing came from this other country, this other thing. And then before you knew it, he had drawn this humongous fantastical map / vision of the world that he's traveled. And for a young child like Gudrid to look at that, it's like, wow, that is amazing. There is so much, out there to see. And then we get to the famous part, or just like the infamous, where he starts to draw, or he's like, like way over here. Oh yeah, it was a spot on like a map he drew, and she was like, what's that way over there? And he's like, that's Vinland. And so she said, that whole day I gazed at the world Leif depicted. It set my heart racing. The world is vast. And yet, we kind of snap back to reality as she is kind of like getting set up to get married and stuff. And so while that's going on, we kind of go back to the whole Leif them planning out their trip and their expedition with the horns. And he mentions that, in order for them to go to the place where they can sell this, because it's a high commodity in a certain other country. That country is Greece, but he says that Greece is perhaps even farther in the opposite direction than where Vinland is from them now. He says we must cross the North Sea to the distant east and the Baltic Sea, navigate Russia, and only then can we reach the Greek capital of Midgard. Even I have never been there. It is a trip to the very edge of the world. And so that is just some very fascinating stuff. And so, Thorfinn's like, hey, yeah, the journey won't be easy, but pretty much everybody is on board to go. As Gudrid kind of walks in on them talking, and I guess it's kind of like begins to plant the seed as, Thorfinn's like, let's go to Greece. And yeah, so that was just like very awesome just seeing, the seeds for that getting planted. And they decide like that they're going to be leaving within a couple of days just because of how far the journey is. Because I think they end up saying that the journey is like a whole year's journey one direction, if I remember correctly. Hold on, let me see. Let me confirm real quick. Well, anywho, not that important, but basically, then we kind of move on to as they're kind of loading up the ship, just preparing to go. Of course, the Gudrid is already trying to stow away and hide on it. And so then basically she's presented with the test where she's like, hey, test me or whatever. And so Leif has like this like giant bundle of ropes and he's like, hey, if you can pick this up or whatever, then we'll let you come or whatever. But like those ropes are notorious. It's like everybody's like, even the strongest of men is having a tough time. But anywho, she ends up picking them up. But, Leif still doesn't let her on. And then basically they have a moment to where she's like, so basically, if I was a guy, then I would have passed and I could have got to join the crew. And he's like, yes. So yeah, so she ends up going back to get ready for the wedding. And I think this is where Thorfinn starts to see like the determination in her eyes as he watches her kind of like, walk off as they, she gets ready to head back to do the wedding. So they end up doing the wedding. And then they're basically like they go through prepare, which it's kind of funny, like looking back at how things were handled during this time, to where like everybody knows like, okay, hey, on the wedding night y'all are gonna bang and all this stuff. And so just like both with Vinland Saga or just like any series that I've seen that takes place within this time period or whatever, to where they're basically like prepping both sides of like, hey, we want to make sure y'all get some good banging in on your wedding night, where they're bathing her, they're telling him like, hey, don't get too drunk because you won't be able to perform and all this stuff. And so basically they end up in the room together. He begins to start to make his move, and she kind of starts to just submit, to where she's just like, fine, this is the life I'm gonna have. But her body subconsciously reacts when he starts to basically like get on top of her, just without thinking. She freaking just pulls a knife out, just stabs him right in the leg. They both freak out because, like I said, she did it just subconsciously. And of course he's freaking out, so he smacks the crap out of her, and she takes this moment to try to escape. And so she ends up going, basically heading for Leif's ship. And so that kind of brings us to the end of the first half of the volume. As she, like I said, it's cold. She, everybody's freaking out. Everybody's trying to find her and hunt her down. And so Thorfinn and them come across her hiding in the barrel. And so they're like, what are you doing? Shouldn't you be doing the thing? It's your wedding night. And so she tells him that she stabbed him and so on and so forth. And then basically they begin plotting, or this eventually leads them to bringing her on to be in the crew. And pardon me, y'all, for keep looking down, but But yeah, so they end up doing that, and she ends up, getting the support from I think it's Leif's sister, who is basically like the lady that's kind of like the caregiver, so to speak, for Gudrid. And so she ends up finding her because she knows, she's like, okay, clearly if Gudrid's gonna try to escape or go somewhere, she's gonna head for the docks. And so yeah, so word gets back to Halfdan, and then he ends up uh, talking about his son's a disgrace and stuff, and then his wife ends up basically telling him like, hey, you know, he needs to take basically take women's opinions and stuff seriously, uh, because yeah, he just belittles women so much, and she tells him like like what would happen, using his chess game as an example, what would happen if each and every piece in this game had its own heart and mind. Perhaps this piece thinks, I'm tired of being ordered around. I have my own will. I would rather leave this board and see the greater world. Then checkmate. A woman has her own free will. She simply chooses to engage in the man's game most of the time. Do not forget this. And so, yeah, and so that's where our journey begins on the ocean. As Gudrid sees her, first just sunrise on the ship on the beautiful ocean waves and stuff. And so while this is going on, we kind of cut over to like this island that we will eventually get land on, that that was recently attacked by, I don't know, some pirates or something. And during that attack, there was a woman that was trying to run away that had a baby, and she got shot with arrows in the back. And basically, when Thorfinn and them end up coming across this island, to make a pit stop, what's it called, the Faroe Islands, Straymoy. So they come to this island and stuff, and what's his name? Leif ends up, of course, Leif knows people everywhere, and so he, has some friends there, so they end up staying with the friends and stuff. And yeah, and so there was a moment where Thorfinn kind of like steps out for the night, just kind of just like reflecting, and Einar comes and talks to him, and he's like, like, this voyage has brought me a fresh respect for what Leif is capable of. Denmark, Norway, Faroes, Iceland. He has friends all over the world who welcome him in. And yeah, and it's like even more than that, he is likable. It's not just his skill with the boat that makes him such a veteran traveler, I suppose. And it says it's a tremendous strength. And yes, and then Thorfinn says, yes, a strength every bit as great as the sword, and it can do things even a sword cannot. And it's like, when I was a boy, there was just one time that I saw my father draw his sword, and it was here in the Faroes. So the story's kind of come full circle all these years later. And so, yeah. Let me see. Yeah, I was just remembering how my father, who hated fighting, still kept his sword around just in case. Gotta stay strapped. You never know when you gotta use it. But yeah, he just says, father understood that he was a man whose presence brought battle. I think that's why he left the mainland and came out here to Iceland to keep himself away. But even farther wasn't able to cast aside his sword until the very end. And yeah. And so so they just continue conversating and stuff. And Thorfinn is just basically, they have like a funny moment where Thorfinn is concerned about not hurting other people, and Einar just laughs. He's like, rather than worrying about your own survival, you're more concerned with whether you can avoid hurting anyone else. And so that was just a very fun, just very awesome moment between the two of them. Uh, and yeah, so they continue on their journey through the sea, and this is where they come across that small island that was attacked. So they're seeing bodies everywhere, and so Thorfinn chooses to go up on land by himself, to go and investigate. And so at the same time, Sigurd and his crew are also in hot pursuit of them, because obviously they kind of, like, okay, he tells us that, like, hey, we will not come back until we chase down Thorfinn and Leif them and bring Gudrid back. So yeah, so they, like I said, following them in their footsteps, went to the same island they just left, and Thorfinn encounters this rabid dog. And so basically what he does is he gets a cloth again, wraps up his arm, and lets the dog bite on it, and then just talks to the dog to calm it down. And then this is where, once the dog starts to trust him, the dog takes him to this torn down building. And so Thorfinn gets Einar to help him lift up the debris. And there's a underground, or there's like a little underground cellar or whatever. And they see a woman in there with a baby holding a knife. And so once Thorfinn kind of just like reassures her, like, hey, you're okay, you're safe, she lets go. She drops the knife and she hands Thorfinn the baby and just simply says, Carly. Karli, Carly. And she dies. And so now we're on this journey now where we have this brand new baby and a dog along for the adventure. So now the adventure just got that much more tougher, that much more perilous. But I freaking love this cover for chapter 112, Obligatory Vengeance. Look at how cute and adorable that is. The baby and the puppy together chilling. So sweet, so adorable. But yeah, so thus begins the adventures of Thorfinn and Gudrid and all them trying to figure out like how babies work and all this stuff, like how to change a diaper. They have a funny moment where they're like, well, it needs milk, so hey, Gudrid, you're a woman, feed the baby. And she's like, that only works, you only make milk if you've had a baby. I have had no children, so I can't make milk. So yeah, so they're having to like improvise. I think they use like goat's milk or something. There was like some goats nearby, and yeah, it is just very funny just watching them just trying to figure out, how they're going to navigate these rough seas now with a baby on board. And so they find some remnants of the lady's family on a nearby island, and they're like, hey, this baby belonged to the lady there, can y'all please take the baby in? And they're like, no. And they basically explain like the reasoning that led to that fight breaking out, and they basically like them taking the baby would more or less just bring more trouble. So they're like, nope, not taking the baby. And so they're like, it's not worth it. And so yeah, so we just continue on our journey, just pushing forward. And we reveal that Carly the baby is a boy. And this is just so wild. Okay, so on this part, I kind of just want to touch on real quick. So Thorfinn and Gudrid kind of have a talk to where, she's kind of talking about how distasteful it was that family didn't take the baby in, and then Thorfinn is like Carly is a boy. Norsemen have an obligation to avenge their slaughtered kin. You cannot dismiss those concerns. When Carly grows up and learns the truth, he will likely seek vengeance against Gilsley's clan. Everyone is afraid of those embers sparking to life. And so she's like, so we'll make sure he doesn't get vengeance. Vengeance, simple. And he's like, if he does not seek vengeance, it is Carly who will be punished. Cowards or shunned, outcasts from society. That's why Norsemen have an obligation. And she, Gudrun isn't fully understanding, but basically he's like, she's like, what's the point of your honor if your whole family dies? It makes no sense. Why does that rule even exist? As he's like, because it's not just the honor of the people involved that matter. They're killing for the sake of peace. What happens to the world if murder comes with no consequences? A murderer will always be met with vengeance. If that rule is upheld with strict vigilance, everyone thinks twice about killing. Not allowing any exceptions is critical to this. Obligatory vengeance exists for the sake of peace for all. The crueler the outcome, the firmer the lesson. And so, yeah, that was just like a very touching moment between the two of them. And then, Thorfinn's just like, yeah, that's what I think about it now, as far as like, the whole revenge and stuff. So, yeah, so we get to a moment because they had to slow down a bit because of the baby. Sigurd catches up to them. And this whole next part is just so funny because they get there and they basically tell him oh, sorry, unfortunately, Gudrun died. She fell off the side, off the boat on the trip or whatever. And at first, Sigurd is like heartbroken. He's torn up, crying. And so Thorfinn and them try to run off and get onto the boat. And then Sigurd looks up and these freaking fools, Gudrun and the bug eyes is freaking climbing inside of a cliff. And that just makes Sigurd just furious because he's like, y'all freaking lied to me. And so, yeah, so the chase continues as they move on. And we basically get to what I'm going to say is a hell of a way to kind of like start to wrap up this volume. We have a moment to where, Gudrun is just in awe because the island that they land on just has so many freaking trees, and she's never seen an actual forest like this. She's only seen like tiny itty bitty trees and stuff. But we see that there is somebody up on the cliff like lurking and watching them. And so later on, as everybody just kind of hanging out or whatever, they begin to tell Gudrun about bears and stuff, whatever. But like, oh well, hey, it's the wintertime. The bears are asleep, they're hibernating or whatever. We have nothing to worry about. And they end up seeing a freaking bear in the distance. And Gudrun is confused because she's only ever seen a white bear. And she's like, it's not white, it's totally black. And at first they're like, oh, maybe, maybe the bear is going to come and mess with us or whatever. Is this bear just full charge and barreling down the hill coming after them? And we have this awesome, badass moment where Thorfinn tells everybody, like, yo, y'all go get on the ship. I'll handle this. So Thorfinn pulls out a dagger and he just roars at the freaking bear. And it causes the bear to legit stop in his tracks for a second. And then they kind of size each other up. As, Thorfinn's basically just like, hey, come on, man. Let's not do this, Mr. Bear. As the bear just rears up and just starts charging at Thorfinn. Thorfinn's dodging. He gets a couple stabs and jabs in or whatever, but of course nothing brutal. And so these panels are just so freaking awesome of just like Thorfinn tussling with this freaking bear as he does like this like flip out the way. As the bear is charging at him, he throws some snow in the bear's eyes, temporarily blinding it, thinking he's got it, and he tries to stab him right in the forehead. And nope. Too shallow, bear's skull is too thick with that little blade, and the bear just freaking just claws him just across his chest and abdomen. And Einar shows up, banging the kettle, trying to distract the bear. And then we see our mysterious hunter lurking in the bushes, crossbow. One shot, one kill. Just yeah, she like she is like that thing so lined up it just goes perfectly. Shoot, takes out the bear one shot. Then she comes out. Well, we find out that this hunter is a she later on. But basically comes out, introduces herself, and she is a pro at this because in no time she has this bear skinned and everything. And she said that she was hired by a local family to take down this bear. And says, because everybody they were like, do you normally hunt bears? She's like, no. She's like, a neighbor asked me, because the neighbor said that there's a bear that doesn't sleep in the winter that is attacking their livestock. And so, yeah, so she goes, hunts the bear, and Thorfinn gets bandaged up or whatever, and so somebody says Thorfinn's name, and the hunter's like, Thorfinn, huh? And she's like, she said, I've never seen a capable person fighting a bear with a single dagger. You have experience in battle. And he's like, yeah, in the past, but I'm just a traveling trader now. And so we reveal her name is Hild, daughter of Harkful the Calm Ford, or Jord, don't know, Hild. And he says, I'm Thorfinn, son of Thor's. And then she just kind of glares at him. And so we kind of just have a moment where they're all kind of just sitting around eating the bear. She's like, hey, y'all can take the bear stuff and sell it or whatever. And so, yeah, they're all sitting around and talking. And, she talks about how, my master told me that evil bears are plagued by evil dreams. That's why they cannot sleep. And Gudra is looking in awe because she's Hild is like, have you never seen a female hunter? And she's like, no. Back home there's none. And then Hild returns and is like, well, I've never seen a female sailor. And so, they're like, like, why did you decide to become a hunter? And then she's like, my family is dead. I have no property. And there's my face, because she has like this scar over her eye. And so, yeah, so she basically learned to hunt. And then this is where we get the reveal of 8 years ago, my father, mother, and sister were killed. A band of warriors attacked the Calm Ford south of Bergen. They were less interested in plunder than the slaughter of the Harkfeld, chieftain of the area. The enemy leader's name was Asklad. My father and I escaped into the woods, but a young warrior spotted us and slashed my father's throat. He was about 14 or 15, wielding a dagger in either hand. I vividly remember one of his companions calling his name Thorfinn. And talk about a shock for the ages. Look at that face of concern. Thorfinn is shitting his pants right now. And she's like, do you remember now? So it was you who killed my father. And Thorfinn's like, she's right. The man who killed your father was me. As everybody's sitting around in shock at this revelation. And he's like, I remember now. I remember who you are. You were the girl who fell into the swamp. And she's like, I intended to merely observe your reaction. I did not expect you to surrender. Lord, I thank you for guiding me to this blessed day. As she begins to pray. And they have a moment where they pause sitting there, and she just stands up and pulls the crossbow on him. And that's how the freaking chapter ends up. Thorfinn gets a damn crossbow pulled on him. So, man, I am beyond excited to dive into the next freaking book, because just so much going on. Just the fact of, like, from starting off with Thorfinn telling everybody like his family and stuff about his past, to meeting Gudrid and then the journey, getting their eyes set on going to Greece, which I did not expect, and then Gudrid stabbing her husband to be, or her husband now, making escape. They're being chased around the world or on their journey by Sigurd and his crew. They freaking pick up a damn baby and a dog along the way, and now they end up with a moment where Thorfinn's past, freaking 8 years later, has circled around and is catching up with him. So that is a hell of a arc that happened across this freaking book. But yeah, I am just so happy to be back reading this series. I'm gonna see if was there any notable notes that he puts at the end of this. So I'm just checking real quick. Yeah, nothing too much. Just talking about, his research on bears and stuff. But yeah, fantastic book. Great read. I hope y'all enjoyed this read through / just like I said, just reflection on this book. I really enjoy doing this, and I hope those of y'all that are listening enjoy it too, because like I said, it's just like really cool, just like getting to reading my stuff and kind of just like recapping and going back through it again with everybody out there that is listening, watching, all that fun stuff. So yeah, so let's go ahead and just wrap this bad boy up, and get out of here. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this episode / video. Like I said, I hope you all enjoyed. As always, make sure you are subscribed to both the podcast feed as well as the YouTube channel. And like I said, if somehow you happen to stumble across this and you haven't listened to the previous ones, hey, like I said, I'll do my best to have all that stuff linked down in the comments. But yeah, let me know what y'all thought of this. Let me know what y'all thought of this book specifically. And please, no spoilers beyond this book, just so that I can continue to enjoy this adventure. But yeah, we got a baby on board. We got a crossbow in the face, pointed in our face. And some literal troubled waters ahead of us. So yeah, y'all be easy. Y'all have an awesome day. And I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye and peace.